Okay, we're live.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Mahone Bay Town Council. A slight change in plans tonight due to a lot of sick staff at Town Hall. We've decided to contain this meeting to a web-based production as we did throughout COVID, although staff are not suffering from COVID. At the end of the session, there will be an opportunity for those of you who may be watching on YouTube to ask a question of council about any topic that is discussed this evening. We'll begin by acknowledging that we are gathered tonight in Mi'kma'ki. It's the ancestral, present, and future territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Tonight, we gather with the intent followed by the living peace and friendship treaties, and we do that with respect, cooperation, and coexistence. Members of council, you have an agenda. We'll call the meeting to order, and the first order of business will be to approve the agenda that was emailed to you. What is your wish? Councillor Carver?
I'd like to move that we approve the agenda as circulated with, but I have two additions, if I may.
Okay. Would you like to give us those additions now?
Yeah, it's just the a verbal report from about public transit in the area. That's sort of coming from via Shack, and the other is just a bit of feedback from the recent meeting about the building inspector, the shared building inspector function.
Okay. Okay, do we have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Feeney, you're seconding the motion to approve the agenda with
Yes, ma'am.
those two amendments? Okay, thank you. You have heard the motion on the question. All in favor? The motion is carried. Thank you. Let's go to the minutes of the meeting, the regular meeting on November the 8th. Councillor Feeney?
Mayor, I'd move that we accept the minutes of the meeting of November 8th as presented.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor now seconds. You've heard the motion on the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. Let's go to the special meeting of November 18th. Councillor Carver? You're on mute, Councillor Carver.
There we go.
There you go.
I move that we, the council, accept the minutes as distributed for the special meeting on November the 18th, 2022.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Now. On the question. All in favor? The motion is carried. We have a presentation tonight. Mr. Dean Waterfield is with us. Dean is one of the illustrious members of our asset management group in Mahone Bay. And Dean wanted to talk with us about the Mahone Bay Community Land Cooperative. Mr. Waterfield, you have 10 minutes, sir.
Thanks very much. Good evening, everyone. As the mayor said, I know some of you from my work on the Asset Management Committee, but I'll just briefly tell you who I am. I've owned a house in town since 2018, and I moved to Mahone Bay permanently in 2020 from Hamilton, Ontario. In Hamilton, I was the Senior Director of Housing and Homelessness for a large nonprofit organization leading housing, mental health, addiction, and harm reduction programs in Hamilton, Brantford, Burlington, and Oakville. Prior to this, I ran my own consulting firm, and I worked with many rural municipalities, nonprofit agencies, and organizations like the Mental Health Commission of Canada. I'm now currently back to doing part-time consulting and doing some volunteering. I apologize for not getting this presentation to you before the meeting. Our group felt a sense of urgency to introduce ourselves to you, and we decided to do that at our Monday night meeting this week. So I hope to return with some other group members in early 2023 to give you a more fulsome presentation about cooperative housing and the cooperative movement in Canada. During the past 2 years, a group of concerned Mahone Bay and area residents have been meeting to discuss affordable rental housing in the town. We have incorporated as the Mahone Bay Community Land Cooperative to purchase, protect, and develop affordable rental housing and act as a land bank if needed. While we are in the early stages of development, our membership already includes social service, housing, and mental health professionals, 2 town councillors, 2 former town councillors, and other concerned citizens. I agreed to act as chair or president of the board. All cooperatives have started this way. The passions and concerns of a few people coalesce around a problem. They talk, act, attract others, find funding, and create cooperatives like Compass Cooperative in Nova Scotia, which now has 76 housing units in 6 different communities in the province. Cooperative housing is nonprofit community housing in which the property and buildings are owned and controlled collectively by member residents through a board they elect. It is secure and stable. There is no outside landlord who might sell or move in. Residents are members, not tenants. Membership means you own a share in the cooperative, so you have a say in how your community is run. We believe this fits with the town's vision of an inclusive, thriving, and healthy community committed to fostering collaborative opportunities for sustainable growth. And we can contribute to the town's strategic plan goal of increasing the supply of affordable housing in the town. Generally, cooperative housing has an intentional income mix among the members, with a portion of housing units reserved for low-income members. It's developed with capital and operating support from government. And currently, the Government of Canada has set aside $1.5 billion for the development of cooperative housing nationally. Recent research shows that market rents in cooperative housing are able to be 25% below actual market rate. As well, co-op housing has not experienced the recent acceleration of rents that has occurred in the private market rental market. Our co-op has 2 goals. First, to develop affordable rental housing from a nonprofit perspective. And second, protect rental housing in town from being purchased from outside investors who will raise rents and do not necessarily act in the interests of our town. We are a member in the Cooperative Housing Federation of Canada and can use their services and expertise to further our development. Many municipalities are helping housing initiatives like this to move forward, and this brings us to a specific request of council. Before making any permanent decision regarding the use of the old fire hall at Kinburn and Hawthorne, can you work with us to determine the feasibility for the building and land to be retrofitted for cooperative housing units? We believe there could be a possibility that the building could be converted into 10 to 12 apartments. What we are proposing is just to give us the time to obtain government funding to commission a feasibility study, give us the time to conduct the study, and then, if feasible, provide us with an opportunity to obtain funding to purchase the building from the town so it could be converted into cooperative housing. That is my presentation, and I can answer any questions as well as I can if people have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Waterfield. Members of council, any questions? Councillor Now.
Yeah, you had mentioned about giving you time to receive government monies. How long, roughly, I know you don't know exactly, would that entail?
I would think to get money to conduct a feasibility study off the top of my head, 3 to 6 months.
Okay.
It would help if we could mutually agree to some deadlines, and we can also use that to try to leverage the funding as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Counselor Carter.
Just in the interest of full disclosure, I'm letting people know that I'm one of the current councillors involved with this group.
Thank you. Anyone else? Counselor Feeney.
Mr. Waterfield, thanks very much. We haven't met, so thanks for coming to council tonight with the presentation. I'm curious about your comments about acquiring kind of residential property that's currently in the rental domain, and if your organization has evaluated, purchasing any of the real estate that have come on the market over the next year, or if that is something that your group would contemplate as being a reasonable scenario.
It's certainly, yes. Thanks, Councillor Feeney. It's a good question. We certainly know that there's the potential for both land and rental housing to come up for sale over the next year to two, maybe three.
Mm-hmm.
So that's part of our sense of urgency in letting you know who we are, and that using the proposal that I just that I just provided you with would be a good test of how we go about doing that. We would certainly be interested in purchasing existing rental stock within the town and work with the tenants to have it converted into a cooperative housing. What it would mean that when you purchase existing housing as a co-op, you're looking to the rent to stay the same, to give people a say in the actual building that they live in. And co-ops usually, and it would be a board decision, and since we don't have housing at the moment, there is no policy about this, but usually you contribute some volunteer work to the running of the co-op. So in terms of your building, it could be such as cutting grass or doing cleaning of common areas, that type of stuff. The goal behind cooperative housing is that you do purchase the housing similar to how we, purchase your own house. If you purchase a house, there's a mortgage. So the government, part of that 1.5 billion is available for the down payment. The members continue to pay the interest costs and the principal cost, and eventually they end up owning the building. This has happened in housing co-ops in Nova Scotia and on Ontario. It becomes really something, I think, when people reach that point in terms of the co-op. It's very empowering for those organizations. What they have done too is maintain the affordability nature of the housing. Recent research studies has shown that even the units that are at market rate, they tend to be at the low end of the market rate, in that the fiscal pressures that push private market rental housing don't push cooperative rental housing.
Interesting.
It is.
And when the organization, I know, is colloquially, Mahone Bay, but I'm assuming that means Mahone Bay and Blockhouse, Maiders Cove, Indian Point.
Yes. So
okay. The comfort of the herd, as we say.
Yeah, but as well, Compass Nova Scotia, they have housing in 6 different communities. So it becomes a viable way. It's called a scattered site approach professionally. And that I know Compass is obtaining or building additional housing units in 3 other communities, which means they'll be in communities from Antigonish right down to Yarmouth once they've done that. But the idea here is we do have people from the Lunenburg community in Bridgewater. We have representation of South Shore Open Door Association in our membership now. So we would be working with those organizations and other concerned citizens, in those communities. If you provide affordable housing in Mahone Bay, people are going to come to that housing from outside of the area too.
Yeah, for sure.
I think, but from my standpoint, though, recently We had a neighbor who was a senior who was in rental housing on our street. Very nice lady, and her rental housing was recently sold, and she's now had to move from Mahone Bay. And this is the other what I'll call benefit that that a housing co-op purchasing the existing rental housing in the town can provide, is that people don't have to move; they can stay in their home.
Deputy Mayor?
Mayor, you asked the question, who's the other person? So just full disclosure, I'm the other member of council in this group, and I guess mine will just be to comment that in many ways we've admired the housing crisis for a long time, and this is just one of those efforts to try and do something concrete, and I believe this probably be very beneficial to our strategic plan, and there's so many things that touch onto providing housing. I know of an employer who's bringing in more than 20 employees in the next 6 months, and they don't have accommodation in Mahone Bay. They've had to look elsewhere, and so it would be great if people who work in Mahone Bay can actually work and live in Mahone Bay. I think that builds community, and so this can be a viable vehicle towards that. And so I hope the council will, I guess, consider what the cooperative is asking and the merits of it, and find a path that can be helpful for all sides.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Wilson?
Thank you. Dean, I'm Kelly Wilson. I'm sorry I haven't met you before either.
It's nice to meet you.
A couple of questions. One is, do we have any notion how much a feasibility study might cost?
Not at this point. Usually those can be, depending upon who you use, there's a list that that we can get from the Nova Scotia office of the Co-op Federation of Canada. So usually this type of cost is usually around $10,000 to $20,000 as a consultant. So you would have a person who's done this before, or a firm who's done this before, come in and conduct that study.
The reason I asked the question is we happen to have $30,000 in our housing budget for something called a strategic plan, or I forget what it's called, but it's just sitting there, and I'm wondering if council would be interested in diverting that money to expedite a feasibility study so that this thing can get moving.
Okay. Any other comments? Mr. Waterfield, I'm curious, this notion of a cooperative owning a building, like an apartment building. I would assume that there is an amount that the tenant would pay each month that would go into a deferred account for the purposes of maintaining the structure.
No, it doesn't work from a condominium perspective, which is, I think, what you're referring to. Similar to a private market landlord, the rent that is charged is in part what pays for that. So, as a co-op, obviously, whenever we would be purchasing a building, we would be, considering a business plan related to the age of the building, what maintenance there's going to be, taking a look at what anticipated costs there's going to be over, usually the term of the mortgage. Similar that I know my house, when we bought it, it's going to need a new roof soon. And then part of the nice thing about the co-op is, since it's nonprofit, it doesn't have to generate that profit. So it can turn more money back into the maintenance of the property.
Okay.
When you buy that, hopefully when you buy that existing rental building, you're not necessarily going to raise the rents in any appreciable way, because those rents are already geared to profit. So you've already probably got some wiggle room or some leeway in there to be setting aside for maintenance and that. When,
Are the tenants the members of the co-op as well, or the
correct,
people, like the co-op owns the building?
yes, yes, they do.
So-
And the tenants are members. So they're really not tenants. They're not tenants in terms
They're
of
owners.
the residential tenancy legislation.
Hmm,
They're
okay.
actually members. They have a vote. They elect a board, which makes the decisions related to rent, what gets fixed, what gets set aside for maintenance. There's all sorts of support out there from these cooperative associations, or where the Nova Scotia chapter of the Federation of Canada, they have a list of I'll refer to it like a shared services list. So similar
Mhm.
to the town teaming up to provide wind generation with Berwick and Antigonish. You go through the Nova Scotia office of the Co-op Federation to find a property management company that gives you a better rate than you would if you went out into the private market, for example.
Okay, thank
As
you.
you start out small, we could also purchase administration services from a larger co-op such as Compass, for example. So we have some options as we develop as an organization to keep costs lean and make sure that property is well cared for.
Okay. CAO, where do you see our procedures around the old fire hall? Is something likely to change before April, May? I think we had at one meeting determined that we would be utilizing it for our public service group until I thought it was April. But that would certainly give Mr. Waterfield's group the 6 months to develop their proposal, would it not? I would think, or?
So the last time the motion was made at council to move Public Works there until at least April just for the winter, that motion was defeated. Where we are now, though, is that we are waiting for a few more things to come back to council. The most recent direction to staff was to reach out to a commercial realtor. When staff started that, we found out the first thing we need to do is a phase 1 environmental assessment. That has been completed. We expect the report to be done. We're hoping it'll be done in time for the December 12th council meeting. And I believe that the actual CAO is expecting another report to come back so that there will be a staff report to council. There are some other reports anticipated still for that building for future. So definitely something will be back to council December 12th. Maybe something else in January, just depending on how quickly reports are completed and that sort of thing. And at this point, once we get that phase 1 environmental, the current direction we have will be to go out to commercial realtors and see what we can get for a package to bring back for council's review.
Okay. And in the meantime, Mr. Waterfield, I presume then that your group is continuing to work on their proposal?
Mm-hmm.
That's the
Yes.
plan?
Yes, that's the plan.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? I'm sorry, Dean, go ahead.
Yeah, that part of the feasibility study that we were talking about would have to include environmental assessments. So that's one step already taken as well, if you've already got that done.
Okay. Great. Anything else from council? Okay, Mr. Waterfield, thank you for bringing this to us. And we will hopefully see a little more of your proposal over the next 6 to 8 weeks.
Yes. And thanks very much for letting me make the presentation.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Okay. let's go to next thing on the agenda is correspondence. We have 2 action items. One is a request from Reverend Brace at the St. James Parish Council with a request for a crosswalk. CAO, did you want to comment?
Certainly. So our traffic authority did receive that before leaving, before going on leave. And he's confident this is something that can be evaluated in plenty of time for when we would be looking at painting lines and stuff. We wouldn't be painting any crosswalks or anything like that at this time. So certainly, as has been pointed out, there are examples of stuff like this. So the traffic authority can look into this and come back to council with some suggestions and some further idea for council's consideration in plenty of time for painting season.
Okay. Do you need a
So-
motion?
It would be helpful if it's the will of council to have a motion to refer this to the traffic authority to report back to council.
Thank you. Councillor Carver.
I'm happy to make that motion. And if somebody seconds it, I just would like to make a comment
Okay.
or
Do we
question.
have a seconder? Councillor Now. On the question, Councillor Carver.
Yes, so two things. So perhaps the report could include some reference to the advisability of consultation with the Indigenous community about the appropriateness or desirability of this kind of crosswalk. And the second thing is, when I looked at the samples, they looked like they were very solid paint. I mean, and I wondered about the slipperiness factor, because we know of one highly esteemed form, Santa Claus, Father Christmas, who took a tumble because of slipping on wet paint at a crosswalk. Sorry to give some specifics, and I felt the slipperiness of paint in crosswalks as well. I always personally try and step on the unpainted part, like when it's wet.
Okay. Acting CAO, is it reasonable to presume that those kinds of issues are what is going to be examined or would normally be examined in a situation like this?
Certainly, but we can also, I particularly appreciate Councillor Carver's comment about consulting with the First Nations community. We could, if the mover and seconder agree, the motion could be amended to refer the request to the traffic authority to report back to council with, I'm making this up on the fly, and as we all know, I'm not feeling so hot, so I apologize, bear with me. To include discussion of consultation with the local First Nation community and an appropriate painted surface, maybe, and then we'll just
Okay.
advise him we're talking about slipperiness. I don't think I have the heart to put slipperiness in a motion.
Mover, are you comfortable with that?
I am happy with that revision.
Seconder? You're okay with that? All right. You heard the motion on the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. Second item is a note from Karen Pinsent on the Father Christmas Festival. Councillor Feeney.
Mayor, as you know, earlier in the year, council received a request from the chamber to expand the seasonality of the comfort stations in town. Council took that under advisement and made an appropriation. I think we increased the budget by a little over $8,000 to move the comfort station on Edgewater Street and make it available until the weekend of December 7th. So I think that council has kind of demonstrated with funding and support for that motion that we understand that there's an infrastructure need for the community during the festival season. I think I'm going to take a little bit of counsel from Susie who says, keep Christmas spirit in your heart every day of the year. So with that, hearing that, I think I'd move the council direct staff to provide a $200 grant to the Father Christmas Festival to fund their general operations.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Carver seconds. On the question, acting CAO?
Thank you. Just a procedural thing. Could we, if the mover and seconder are okay with that, could we change that to, rather than the Father Christmas Festival, the season of Father Christmas? Is there
Of
a new
course.
name? Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Yeah.
Okay. Seconder, you're okay with that? Yes, okay. All right. On the motion, all in favor? Are you questioning, Deputy Mayor? You're on mute, sir.
Sorry, I have a quick question. Not that I disagree with the motion, but just reflecting upon it, the difference is only $180. And so I understand the lateness, I understand the way in which this request has come is not what we would desire, but I would say, let's just support this and communicate that we would appreciate, I guess, much more coordinated process whereby these requests come in a way that we are able to plan for as a town, as opposed to last minute. So if the mover and seconder are amenable, I would say let's meet them where they're at. It's a time of the year where we want to, like Councillor Finney said, have the Christmas spirit in us. Let's give grace in this particular instance, but maybe what I would add is that we communicate maybe by officially writing and sort of expressing our concern about the increasing cost that's coming to council, and maybe a better planned approach in the new year, so that things that can be covered in the grants are covered off in the grants when you're doing our budget, and we don't have these incremental requests across the year.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Wilson, and then Councillor Now.
Someone has to be the Grinch. It's the actual request, as I can read this letter, is for $300 to run the portables plus keeping, which, as I understand it, are because the facilities on the wharf are closed. But then in the second paragraph asks to have the facilities on the wharf open as well. So the actual request is for something significantly larger than $380. My question is, why don't they just run the race the other way and run it from the washrooms that are open and return to that?
Good point. Councillor Now.
Yeah, I was talking to Ms. Pinsent this week about this very same issue. Because first of all, when I read it, I thought it was only there for the 1 week, for the one night, for the reindeer run. But apparently they're renting these porta potties for 3 weeks, so that they have something down at the far end of town to try to draw people to the far end of town. I'm not sure they have anything going on that's going to draw people down that way. But anyway, I told her that I thought it was really kind of late in the year for her to do that. But anyway, that it's for the full 3 weeks. And so for 3 weeks, I guess that's a pretty reasonable rate, because I was talking to a local person that does porta potties, and it was only for the one night he would have been willing to donate to for the one night. But when it's 3 weeks, he, that changes the whole thing. And they've already signed a contract with the people. So I asked her, I said, if council doesn't give the money, I said, what are you going to do? She said, well, we'll find the money. So, I think if we meet them halfway, which is roughly the $200, I think, that seems fair.
Okay. CAO, what's our policy with respect to applying for grant considerations? Don't we have a cutoff date for a fiscal year to?
March 31st.
So this request, if it had come to us by March 31st, 2022, we would have considered in the current round of grants.
That's correct.
So at a minimum, if this motion passes council, our response to the Season of Father Christmas organizers is that if they want money for 2023, a grant, then the request should be here by 31 March 2023. Is that not the case?
I'm sorry, are you asking me, your worship?
Yes, please.
Yes, it should be. I will say though that over the last few years, council has actually left some money in a bit of a little kitty, just so that if any last minute requests came in. So while we do insist that we have grant requests in by March 31st, it has been the practice of council over the last few years to entertain grant requests that came in if there was money
For the
available.
unforeseens.
Exactly.
Okay, good. Anything else on the question? Councillor Kerr.
Just as a matter of information and context, I was trying to find on the website the amount of money that we do provide as a grant to the chamber. And is this a chamber project? Is Ms. Pinson asking on behalf of the chamber, or is it entirely separate?
I would hesitate to respond to that publicly because the
It's
letter
okay.
doesn't make it explicitly clear.
Right. Sorry. Okay. Well, thank you. I'll leave that question to another time. It's ambiguous.
So we have a motion on the floor. And the motion is for town. Has the mover and the shaker accepted the friendly amendment proposed by the deputy mayor?
Well, I just want a couple things. One, I think I didn't want this motion to kind of open up what is, in my opinion, a lack of courtesy provided by the date of the letter and the tone of the letter, but simply to follow through with some financial support, which is, I think, the salient point at this late date. I just want it to be crystal clear, though, that the dollar amount I'm certainly amenable to taking the deputy mayor's perspective and running with that. But I just want it to be very crystal clear that we're just providing money. The allocation of the money to porta potties or any other expenditures entirely the purview of the organization. I believe the town has stepped up and addressed the issue around comfort stations for the community for that period of time, and we've spent, quite a few thousands of dollars to ensure that the comfort stations would be available through December. So, I'm okay with the dollar amount, and if they choose to use it to augment the porta potties, go forth and multiply. But I just want to make sure that the town is not paying that bill directly, because my opinion, it's unwarranted given the town's substantial financial investment. And to put it in context, Mayor, and you've been around the table a long time. I mean, we're spending, the town of Mahone Bay and its 486 property taxpayers are paying $40,000 a year to run the porta potties. The comfort stations.
Yes.
It's a significant investment, and it's a significant contribution to the business community and to the tourism agenda. And I think the town has done really almost above and beyond the call of duty as far as the financial support for that one function. So again, in the spirit of the Christmas season, I think I would accept the deputy mayor's friendly amendment, but I think just as long as the motion speaks specifically to the dollar amount, not necessarily the intended use.
Okay. Seconder, are you in agreement with that? Okay. Oh, it's Councillor Carver.
Yes, and to add the request for early submission of requests
Yes.
in the future.
Thank you for that reminder. You've heard the motion. Question is concluded. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. Let's go to correspondence for information items. What is your wish, council? Councillor Wilson,
Motion to receive and file, your worship.
thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Now. Okay, motion to receive and file. Deputy Mayor on the question.
Just a quick question around the proclamation of the tourism accommodation and registration requirements. I was sort of wondering if the town would be planning to do something about communicating that to folks around town, and what's required and where people register and all that kind of stuff. Because I think it might be helpful for those with short-term rentals to be aware from a town perspective. Not hope that the province has communicated very well and everybody knows, but at least we can support that communication in a much better way, I think, than it's been done so far.
Okay.
Yeah.
Deputy CAO, acting CAO.
Yes, I agree with you, Deputy Mayor, that any changes in this would certainly be best spread out in our community as well, rather than expecting the province to their communications to have reached everyone. I do want to spend some time with our development officer on this as well, and not to sound cynical, but I really want to look at these from all sides and see, what does this actually mean? What does it look like? What's the town's role? What does the province actually do? I just want to get into this a little bit more, and part of that would be communication. But I think we need to understand it better as a staff, because we need to know what to advise people. And once we get that into a nice, succinct list, I hope, then that, I think, is the message that needs to go out as clear as possible, I believe.
Okay. Councillor Finney, then Councillor Nunn.
Again, just to dovetail with the CAO's perspective there of its early days, probably on really what this means, but I was struck by the kind of removal of the owner occupied clause. And I know that at the land use bylaw and with our consultation with the folks at Upland and in that committee, we did spend as a committee quite a bit of time contemplating the use of the owner occupied clause within the legislation to potentially roll out some town policies. So it doesn't appear to me, and I'm certainly no expert, and maybe I'm way off base here, but it appears to me that clause has been removed from the legislation, which certainly would preclude a lot of municipalities from doing things that we had contemplated a year ago. So I do think that it's probably worth our while to make sure that whatever feedback and documentation we have from subject matter experts does get provided to the entire, land use bylaw review committee, or whatever we're calling our committee. It's been a while since we've met, but it probably makes sense to bring whatever information is available back to that committee as well, Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Now.
Yeah, I just have concern as to, we're putting this information out there, but who are we gonna send it to? Because we don't have a list of registrants for the short-term rentals. There's no requirement for that as of yet. So we are sort of flying, let's see, our pants to say as to who we send it to, because we don't know for sure who's running these short-term rentals.
One of the problems. Acting CAO. And then I'm going to go back to the deputy mayor after that.
Okay, thank you. Just to quickly respond to that, Councillor, now my thought would be to get it out there to as many people as possible. As you say, we don't necessarily have a list, but not only that, there are people right now that are deciding whether or not they're going to take part in a tourist rental or, do something with that extra room. So I think we need to get it out there to everybody.
Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, just to respond to something Councillor Finney mentioned around the owner-occupied piece, it's not that they've got rid of it. I think actually what they've done will help what we're talking about during in the Plan Mahombe process. It's just a requirement to register, which I think if we're talking about short-term rental, regulating it as an industry, registration is the first step, because registration now gives you the database that you need to actually now go ahead and sort of figure out, so is it a full house? Is it just a room in a house? That registration process is to capture that. And so that requires that all, even owner-occupied, are tackled. I think that will help us when we come to the step of we actually want to make any changes to.
No, I mean, I think that's a fair point, Deputy Mayor. I think the original legislation, although it had that requirement to register, there was no information in the box to register to who and who was going to administer the registration. So I think that's a fair point.
Yeah.
So I think it's early days, but it certainly seems like the province wants to step up to some solution.
Okay. Acting CAO. Did you have a
Oh, I'm
comment?
sorry. I was just playing with my pen. I thought you were going to ask
Oh,
me a
there
question.
you go.
I apologize.
Playing with your pen is often mistaken for waiting to comment. Can we table this item till perhaps the second meeting in January, and you would have an opportunity to talk with staff and get the information you were just suggesting we should have to consider?
Just to clarify, are you suggesting like a staff report to come back about it or something like that? You could do that with a motion from council. That would be fine.
Okay, and is that enough time? Second meeting in January?
Well, that's exactly what I'm wondering. I think when we jump down that rabbit hole, we need to tie a rope around our waist, but
Okay.
I think we can have something back by second meeting in
Doesn't
January.
have to be that fast, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I'll probably suggest we do the receive and file, but also a motion that brings this up for conversation during the steering committee meeting we will have, I think in a few weeks' time. Then that, because the development officer will be part of that process, and we can have a fulsome conversation there. I don't think staff necessarily need to do a full report. It's just a conversation to know what this will impact the process going forward, if that makes sense for council.
Okay. Then we'll refer to the motion that's on the floor. Motion's been heard and we've had the question. All in favor?
Sorry, may I
This
ask
is
a
to
question?
receive and file.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, all in favor? Motion's carried. Okay,
Mayor, I'll move a motion to have this that the letter also forwarded to the Plan Mahombe process steering committee for discussion.
okay, thank you. Do we have a seconder for the deputy mayor's motion? Councillor Carver? You've heard the motion. On the question, all in favor? The motion is carried. Thank you. Let's go to item number 6. Staff reports. You've got the staff report in your package. Any questions concerning it or issues, Councillor Carver?
Well, I have a question for the acting CAO, if she's willing or able to comment on the status of the draft protocols for the new community hall. The item on the staff report refers to using the fire hall as an emergency shelter, but given that winter is coming and given that the power outage on Monday triggered some questions about whether the fire hall will be used as a comfort center as distinct from an emergency shelter. So a comfort center being more sometimes called a warming center, where people can go and recharge devices, get a snack, get warm. Is the CAO able to make some comments on that aspect of shelter or center, warming centers?
Certainly. So We have had, the former fire hall was set up to be a comfort center should it be needed. The most essential piece of that from a community perspective is to identify volunteers who are able to go to be present when a comfort center has been activated. This year, when we started to get back into really hurricane season, we realized that the group that we had identified to work with before was no longer able to perform that role. So as you've noted, Councillor Carver, there is work being done with our assistant emergency coordinator that works with Mahone Bay, developing protocols for the use of the new fire hall for actually both of those purposes, either a comfort center or or an emergency shelter. But if an emergency shelter would need to be opened, then that involves the Red Cross. The issue is identifying a community group or volunteers that we can call in for to staff that comfort center should it be opened. So while that work is still going on, that's the snag that we've encountered now. So I had a conversation actually earlier today, and I understand that they're hoping to bring some ideas to council in January, because really the biggest issue right now is identifying who those people would be. And it is difficult to have people that are ready and able to go out should that be needed, but then hopefully we don't call them. But I will say is when I hope that answers your question, there is another little piece in what you asked me as well that I think is really important, that Monday was a fantastic example of what can happen. We had a fantastic crew, but just one thing went wrong after another. It should have been 2 hours, and that included dealing with a broken wire in the middle of the street. And when they say 2 hours, generally they mean less than that, just in case. But it was cold. I was standing outside of the team for a while. It was terrible. But we also need to take this as an opportunity to remember the importance of being prepared to shelter in place. It is so important to build individual and community resiliency. So I encourage any member of council, if you're talking to someone, certainly this is where we are with this situation, but please encourage people to go to our website, contact Town Hall for information about how to be prepared to shelter in place. We have all kinds of resources at Town Hall. We have stuff on our website, and it's a matter of preparedness. And it's lucky it wasn't colder than it was. If Monday had happened in February, it would have been a very bad day. So we're certainly working on this, but please take this opportunity to tell everybody to work on being prepared to shelter in place.
Thank
Does
you.
that answer your question? Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Acting CAO. That's very helpful, and I hope the public do take into account that information about the individual responsibility to be prepared for 72 hours sheltering in place. And sometimes that plan should involve going somewhere else. if you know, to outside of town or to somewhere else. At any rate, that information is all online on the town website and on the REMO, the Regional Emergency Management Organization for Lunenburg County. Lots and lots of information. So thanks.
If I may, Councillor Carver, I know you were involved with the Community Resiliency Project, as was the mayor a few years back. And part of that too is that community piece. You know, if you're cold in your house, I bet you your neighbor is too. We were at Town Hall on Monday in the dark and in the cold and sharing our battery packs and all that kind of stuff and sitting together, because there was no sense in me being in my office on the 3rd floor when the other 2 people were on the 1st floor. We may as well be in the same space. And so, I mean, it's a kind of a silly example about 3 of us in Town Hall, but it really does make a difference. You know, if you have a neighbor that has health concerns or mobility issues or whatever, then it's all about community resiliency. And you never know, maybe they just made a fresh pot of coffee before the power went off, right? Never know.
Okay, Councillor Wilson.
Yes, just in case we lose track of this entirely, I'd like to remind council and the CAO that we're still looking at the Q1 results for water losses. According to that data, we're still losing more water than we're selling. I'd be very curious to know if we've made any progress in that file, but with lack of data, it's impossible to tell.
Okay. Acting CAO?
This is entirely a superficial response to that, just like to advise that the water section was not updated. We've had an incredibly couple busy weeks at town hall with any number of things coming out of the blue, up to and including water flushing and our new employee and that sort of thing. So we do not have the most recent data. That in no way changes your point, Councillor Wilson. You are completely correct. It was just a matter of if anybody's looking at that and saying that's the data we saw before. Yes, it is. And I apologize for that from a staff perspective, but in no way does that change your point. And I take your point.
So we really don't know if there have been any changes. Is that what we're saying, Acting CAO?
Correct, but there hasn't been anything that would make a significant change.
think
I
that,
mean,
no.
yeah, I mean, they're always out there and finding, you know, there's a little repair they do and every little repair gets a little bit, but as Councillor Wilson has said many times, it's more than just what they pick up with the incidentals.
And okay, Deputy Mayor, did you have a comment?
Yeah, and not wanting to move on from there, if you had a comment on that, I just wanted to comment on something else.
Okay, just before we leave that, if you would, Deputy Mayor, Acting CAO, what is the plan to manage these discrepancies that Councillor Wilson is referring to?
We have been applying for funding
Yeah.
for a couple of years.
$6 million,
Yeah.
Mayor.
Yeah, okay.
That's the solution. 6 million.
I'll tell you that the people I go to work with every day are as frustrated with it as Councillor Feeney, but and that's what we need. That's what we need
Yeah.
to do. We have very old infrastructure. We're ever hopeful that that's going to change. I mean, everybody says we haven't heard anything in 2 years, but then I mean, if you stop and you think the province has been spending a lot of money on the pandemic and pandemic related stuff, but we're really hoping that they get back to giving us money to
Okay.
update very outdated infrastructure.
And that's a good message for us to share with the citizens, right? That it's not just a question of staff not dealing with it. They are making efforts, every effort to deal with it, but they've got 6 million reasons, as Councillor Feeney notes, that stands in their way.
The only people that are more upset about this than Councillor Wilson and Councillor Feeney are the guys that climb down in the holes in all kinds of weather and, you know, it's snowing and there's another leak or they have to go out
Mhm.
again because there's something else. They are as at least as desperate, probably more so, for that money to come through.
Now tell the guys that down the hole that we said thank you very much
Geez,
for
Mayor,
their being there.
Mayor, you've got to leave a few problems for the next councillor to solve. Come on.
Maybe we can find a different one, Councillor Feeney.
Fair enough.
Deputy Mayor, did you have a final comment?
Yeah, I was just trying to mention that there's a bench installation report that was supposed to be coming to council with the help of the age-friendly committee, which was disbanded a while ago. And so item number 2 might be either needs some changes or needs to get out of that report.
Okay, Councillor Now, then Councillor Carver. You're on mute, Councillor Now.
That's better. Just have a question on the electrical part down below. In regard to the inspection at the fire hall, it mentions that the inspection was done and then we know that was done. So the town staff, the town electrical staff did that inspection? Because I know Nova Scotia Power there for a while was doing them in town. So our town staff did that inspection, do you know?
If I could answer that one directly, and then maybe after Councillor Carver, I can go back and answer Deputy Mayor's question. But yes, the town, the electric utility does have an electric inspector. Yes, we have a fully qualified inspector that does our own inspections.
Okay.
We've done it for several years.
The only question I have on that then is that in the code, you, in a kitchen, that type of thing, you have to have split plugs. The ones in our kitchen are not split. So they should not have passed electrical inspection.
I can definitely take that to the team and find out more information about that. I'm not a qualified electrical inspector, so
No,
I'm sorry, I can't give you an answer right
Just
now,
a-
but I
you
can.
know, when
I
we're
can
going through the
follow up.
building, when we're going through the building process, that question was asked, and they said, if we put plugs in, they have to be split. And I know that these ones aren't split because you plug two things in, it's not long before the breaker goes. Just want to bring it to your attention. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Now, CAO, you wanted to go back to the deputy mayor's comment?
Yes, thank you. The deputy mayor had a question about the bench program. Yes, it's one of those things that keeps getting bumped as other things come in. But as far as the connection to Age Friendly Committee, the Age Friendly Committee came up with a list of recommended locations. And we took that list when we spoke to the regional accessibility coordinator. The Age Friendly Community Committee did a few things like a walkability assessment, and they actually did some work to come up with some suggested locations. So we do have that work from the committee. So yes, it's the thing that just keeps getting bumped for another priority, but it is still, that work is still happening in the background.
Thank you. Councillor Carver.
I too was going to comment on the deputy mayor's comment about the bench installation program, because it was originated in the Age Friendly Committee some years ago and is still live and pending.
Okay. What's the funding level in this year's budget for the bench program? Deputy acting CAO?
I don't have that number off the top of my head, Your Worship.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I
Okay,
can find that out for you and follow up.
yes, please. All right, anything else on the staff report to council? This is the end of the month report. This is the big one. No, nothing? All right. Entertain a motion to receive the report, the staff report to council. Moved by Councillor Carver, seconded by Councillor Feeney. On the question, all in favor? Thank you. Motion is carried. Let's go to the plaquing ceremony. Councillor Feeney.
Mayor, as you know, with the council motion, we intended to have the plaquing of the town hall on December the 2nd, but due to some conflicts, we propose to defer the plaquing until the spring. And we'd like to push this back to the HAC's next meeting to determine an appropriate date for the plaquing.
Okay. Okay, we don't need a motion to do that, I don't think. Acting CAO? No?
Well,
Your
but
Worship.
I'm happy to make a motion, Mayor, to defer
Okay.
because I think it was a original council motion to approve it. So
To have it for that date?
I believe so, Mayor. So I'd move that council defer the plaquing ceremony for the town hall to a later date and refer the item back to the HAC for the recommendation on a follow-up date.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Councillor Now seconds. On the motion. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. Let's go to item number 7. Ministerial appointment to the Police Advisory Board.
You missed 6.2, Your Worship.
I did. Okay, 6.2. Oh, the draft meeting calendar. How can we miss that? My God, something as bright and colorful as that is. Deputy or Acting CAO, did you want to comment on the calendar?
Thank you. Yes. As has been said before, the more committees we get, the fewer colors we have to use. So one thing I will point out, and I believe there's discussion to be had amongst members of council. One thing you'll note is that I have not included that third Friday of the month as to hold for a special council meeting. I've not included that in the meeting in the calendar in front of you because I think that's more useful for council. I have concerns about putting that on the public meeting the public calendar that would go out because it suggests that there will be a special council meeting on that date. And it also suggests that that would be the only time there would be a special council meeting. So while, yes, all of us here are really trying to limit that and plan that, I wouldn't want to put anything out that would confuse the public. So that's one thing that's different here. But then, as I say, I believe there's some discussion, some ideas amongst members of council.
Okay. Comments? Council? Councillor Feeney?
Mayor, just had a couple thoughts. Really, there were just a few minor changes I made in an email earlier today that I think might warrant some further consideration. One, there's the council meeting falls right smack in the middle of the planned March breaks for this based on the school year, and I noticed that several organizations that we're all involved with are trying to keep that one particular week clear for folks that have school-age children who may want to travel and staff it as well. So I believe that's the week of March 12th is the Sunday. I'd recommend that we take the meeting on the 14th and defer it by a week or move it up forward by a week, whatever is deemed to be most appropriate. The other items are and I know it's just by the happenstance of the calendar year this year. We have two council meetings, one on the day after Thanksgiving Monday and one after the Tuesday after Easter Monday. And I'm wondering if it would make sense to defer those two meetings, which are on the Tuesdays, to the Thursdays to provide an opportunity for people who are traveling, which is a common occurrence for people around those two holidays, to have a little more prep time for the council meeting. So that's the meeting in October, or first meeting in October, the Tuesday, and the first meeting, I believe, Mo, in April, if I'm not mistaken. And the only other two thoughts I have is around we know that we're going to have some remote participation in our meetings in March, I believe, based on vacation schedules and councilors and perhaps the mayor taking advantage of our ability to have meetings and participate remotely. I'm wondering if it would make sense to maybe move the dates of the calendar, move the meeting timing in those March meetings up earlier. So instead of having the meeting start at 7 o'clock, maybe we could move it up to like 3 o'clock in the afternoon or something like that. I think dialing into Zoom meetings at midnight doesn't strike me as an excellent way to spend time. And again, the final item, and again, these aren't hills to die on, but I do think these slight changes, which will change from year to year, and that's the beautiful thing about the juggling act that the CAO undertakes with the calendar each year and gives council the chance to review these things in advance. So hence the conversation. But really, I know we've historically tried to say that we're not going to have any council meetings in August. And I guess it hasn't really been, although we aspire to do that, I think it certainly hasn't been the case. And I'm wondering if we wouldn't do ourselves a favor by simply picking a convenient time in August. And it doesn't necessarily have to be Thursday or Tuesday at 7 o'clock. Maybe it could be Monday at 9 o'clock in the morning. Not sure, but I wonder if it would make sense to simply, put a formal date for a meeting. And hey, if there's nothing on the agenda that's required, well, you could always certainly cancel it if we had due notice.
Okay, Councillor Carver.
Um, I'm happy with the schedule the way it is. I don't like shifting things around. I think it works better to have a regular pattern. And if we're going to have a regular pattern of Tuesdays and Thursdays, then stick with it and make do somehow. I acknowledge the problem of preparation, perhaps over holiday weekends. But perhaps there's some other way of accommodating that rather than shifting the meeting time. And I just looked at my schedule for August, and in fact, this past August was not bad as far as I can see for council meetings. The previous August was loaded with council meetings during August. So I don't feel a need to add another meeting in there. And as for rescheduling meeting times for people who are away in a different time zone, again, I go back to my preference would be to stick with our time, with our schedule. That's our time, that's our schedule, that's when people expect it to be. That's my thought.
Okay. Any other comments? Councillor Wilson.
Yes, while we digest that discussion, I just have a mundane one, and that is about the audit committee. I think we agreed that staff would have their quarterly results ready for an audit committee meeting at roughly 5 weeks after the end of each quarter. And if I'm reading this color chart correctly, I see that our audit committee is scheduled to meet in mid-January, mid-February, mid-September, and mid-October, and that's it. And that doesn't reflect what we had intended, I don't think. And I'm wondering if we can revise that so that the audit committee meets roughly 5 weeks after the end of each quarter to review the results and talk about important financial stuff.
Okay. There we go. I'm losing my camera here. Now I got it back. Deputy Acting CAO.
So a couple things there. After I said that was all I had listening to council, I had an attack of guilt because the thing I didn't point out that's slightly different in the draft 2023 council and committee meeting schedule in front of you is that the first council meeting of the month is usually the second Tuesday. In February, the draft calendar has it on the first Tuesday because the second Tuesday is Valentine's Day. And as we know, we are going to be participating in the hearing with the UARB here in town. So that's one slight difference in there. To Councillor Wilson's point about meeting every 5 weeks, I apologize, we can certainly make that change. As you know, I'm not a resource specifically for that committee unless I get called in for something. But the discussion with me about it is which little blocks to color. And the meeting dates they had suggested had to do with the preparation for the budget and for the audit. So how does that, I would say they'd still want to do those early ones in January and February based on the conversation I overheard. But then we'd be looking at 5 weeks after the end of March. So maybe looking, maybe early May, just looking what else is going on. The end of April is kind of busy. Is that sort of what we're thinking? Do we want to have, I'm just kind of curious where we go with this. Do we want to send this back to staff to make some recommendations? Do we want to put in some audit dates now? I'm curious because I think the February 16th meeting on the draft calendar would probably meet that requirement for the end of that quarter. So then we'd be looking for something in May. We could then address Councillor Feeney's suggestion about a meeting in August, but we could look at something the end of July or something like that, and then in November. Is that, we have an October 19th meeting on the draft calendar. We could make an audit committee meeting in maybe even do the November 16th instead of October 19th. Does that sound good to people?
Yeah, something like that would work.
Yeah,
Okay, so we'll go November 16th. And then we'll go. I saw a couple of shakes of heads when I said about August. So do we want to look at, again, I'm not an accountant, but do we want to look at the last week in July, or early in September looks really busy? I'm hesitant to suggest that. But there is one September 21st on the calendar. Would that be sufficient under the circumstances? Okay.
Considering we haven't done it at all, I thought would be a good compromise.
All right, so then we're only looking for one. Do we want to say maybe May 18th for audit and finance?
Yep.
Okay. So that would then be, we'd have audit and finance committee meetings on January 19th, February 16th, May 18th, September 21st, and November 16th. I can make those changes if that's council's amenable to that.
okay,
Perfect.
perfect. Very good. Councillor Wilson.
Just for the record, your worship, I would like to say that I agree with Councillor Feeney's takeaway on the other meetings. I think it's only sensible to try and accommodate people, and we should be hopefully flexible enough to be able to do that.
Okay. Deputy Mayor, you look pensive. Are you gonna?
The one I'm pretty clear about is I think the March break meeting makes sense to move in many ways. So if we can move that, I'm pretty okay with that. I wasn't very sure about the time change in the meeting, because I think that might affect my availability. Because if it's a Tuesday, I would not. Yeah, that would impact my being available, because my day meetings will trump anything council will put on that particular day to a certain extent. So I'm hesitant to say yay or nay to that. Maybe an approach we can have is that as we get closer to that meeting, and if somebody has a special request for us to move it with a month's notice, then we can consider it as council to do a move rather than contemplate it now, if that's an accommodation that works.
Acting CAO?
So, when I started doing these calendars, we used to ask people about their availability, and certainly that came up around, it was always March. March was always the issue, and we used to only do one council meeting in March because we'd know we'd have people away.
It was also the end of the budget year of CAO, and you and your staff would be up to your eyeballs with year-end functions in March too.
Absolutely. So I'm not aware of times that people were going to be away and zooming in from different time zones and stuff, but I wonder if, and not to presuppose council's decision about Councillor Feeney's point versus Councillor Carver's point, but the deputy mayor just said it's the week of the 12th to the 18th. That's March break, is it? I have it on an earlier version of this calendar, but not the one in front of me now. So March 10th, we have a set aside for the cemetery meeting, but that's an afternoon meeting. If we were to take the first council meeting in March and put it on the morning, do one of those Friday morning things on the 10th, would that address some of the concerns that people had about that? Just so there's a thought from someone who's been coloring a lot of boxes and having a lot of conversations about time.
Yeah, like
Anyone?
I think Maureen, whether it's Thursday night at 7 o'clock or Friday morning or Friday at some point versus the following Tuesday, I think that would, or the following Thursday. But I think either either move it, I think either move it back a week or move it forward a week is sort of where my head was. But, you know, I think you got the message. It probably makes sense for the March break week to try to keep that open for counselors who have, you know, who have school-age children. If we ever decide we're ever going to have counselors with school-age children ever again after this term. But I think this is, I think we should just be a little bit more cognizant of the fact that, you know, there are times where people have vacation slots and they're generally around holidays, you know, and whether it's Christmas, Easter, Thanksgiving, or March break, those aren't bad weeks to try to avoid having council meetings.
So from a staff perspective, I would much rather see if it were to move earlier in the month, because if we were to go to the following week, then we get really close with council meetings and that gets problematic.
Deputy Mayor has a comment?
Yeah, so how about getting rid of it?
March?
We're getting rid of that first meeting.
Done.
If we think it could work, I think that would be no
Yeah.
problem.
Councillor Carver?
Would it work to move it to the 17th? No. Oh, that's still a holiday week. Sorry, never mind.
Your worship, if I may, so again, we used to only have one meeting in March, but the assignments to staff, and it's a much busier staff now, it's a much busier council. So, you know, I'm fine with whatever council decides, but I would suspect that if council were to entirely remove the first March meeting, that there would end up being a special council meeting. And again, that can all be scheduled and that sort of thing, but just a heads up.
Okay, Councillor Carver and then Deputy Mayor.
I'd like to ask, what is the meeting that's on the 10th? It's marked in a brown color and I can't see a corresponding one in the samples.
That's cemetery, and I'm not sure why. It's an unfortunate coloring issue, but that's
I see.
a
Okay.
cemetery meeting. And they generally take place, I think, at 1 o'clock. And that's why I was saying we might, if we wanted to move it earlier, we've been able to do 9 a.m. Friday meetings. Tends to work pretty well if we have a special meeting slot we need to find. So
That
we
would be
could
my-
always
that would
do
be my
that.
preference to do that if we're going to move that one. Although there's
Okay.
still the option of getting rid of it altogether, but I take the point about it being much busier. We we seldom have nothing to say and no issues to address. So my vote would be to put it on the 10th.
Deputy Mayor?
Just wanted to mention that we do still have that hold for I think the 24th for a special meeting, which we're holding anyways. So even if we get rid of it and you find that there's something that needs to be done, that 24th is still there for us to take advantage of.
Yeah.
Because the challenge with if we're moving this for the sake of somebody who might be traveling, so if I'm going somewhere for March break, I would want to travel on the Friday. So I'm maximizing my break, right? So if we're doing it for that purpose, then putting a meeting on Friday then negates everything we've done, because now somebody's having to shuffle things around anyway. So
Yeah.
I always thought Thursday, March 9th was at 7 o'clock was a reasonable accommodation. And then let Friday roll for the cemetery committee, and if there's business, and if there's no business, then we'll deal with that in due course.
Okay. Acting CAO, you have a comment?
I do. I would feel very disloyal to Mr. Hyde if I didn't point out.
Oh,
that
no,
if he
yeah.
were here- Oh, no, if he were
Yeah,
here,
fair
he would
enough.
definitely say, he would caution very vehemently against removing the meeting altogether. So that's my loyalty to my colleague. But I definitely take your point, Deputy Mayor, about leaving on the Friday, especially if people are really traveling. Again, it's council's calendar, do whatever you want. But I think about the 9th. I don't know if there's any thought about what if that one were in the morning. I'm looking at that week. There's potentially a PAC meeting Tuesday night at 7, an HAC meeting Wednesday night. I'm just, if we do that third night in a row, how tired are people going to be? I know it may seem silly to people that are watching this recording later, but it can be a lot. And the council meeting is the one with a lot of information. So again, I don't go to all 3 of those meetings, so it's not my brain that we're worried about. I'm tossing out ideas to see where council lands on stuff.
Councillor Feeney.
So Mayor, I think council appreciates that the CAO provided the draft of the agendas for next year. And I mean, it's late November. We don't have to have it nailed down entirely this evening, but I think council had a chance to provide some feedback. There's also other committees like REMO and Joint Services Board area. There's the mayors and wardens meeting that you attend, and all of the other committees and ad hoc things. So I think the flavor of the agendas are, I think the calendar does a nice job of reminding us when we're obligated to show up. There's a lot more activity than is just denoted on the calendar, however. But anyway, there's some feedback that we've kicked around tonight. And I mean, we can always avail of emails to send any other further perspectives on the points raised. And so I'm happy, Mayor, with having the opportunity to make a few suggestions, and there's some other good ones tonight as well. So wherever it ends up, we'll see each other a lot all through 2023. I have no doubt.
Acting CAO.
I love that confidence, and I'm really sorry, but I do need a motion to approve as amended, or you can tell me to bring it back in early December, but we are going to have to get something out to print to the community. So what I have right now, we've made those changes to the Audit and Finance Committee. And the only conversation I'm still hearing now is about March. Do council members think that we'd be able to come up with something tonight, or do we need to bring this back to the December meeting?
Deputy Mayor.
So I'd rather we didn't bring it back. I'd rather we dealt with it, and I'm okay with Thursday during the day. If we can agree on that, I think that's the only change that's maybe hanging things up, and can move on.
Thursday, March 9th, Francis?
Thursday, March 9th during the day.
During the daytime.
Yeah.
Okay. That sound like a doable option?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go with that. Let's minimize the confusion to me as well as to the public. And if you can make the meeting, make the meeting. If you can't make it, you can't make it, right? Okay.
So your worship, I'd be looking for a motion to approve the calendar as amended, sorry. And for clarification, that is the amendments are the changes to those Audit and Finance Committee meeting dates, and the moving that first March meeting date to 9 a.m. on Thursday, March 9th.
Excellent. Councillor Wilson, making that motion. Councillor Now seconds it. On the question? All in favor? Thank you. Now we got our
Thank you.
year planned out. Let's go to the next item on the agenda. That was 6.2. The six, yeah. Now let's go to the ministerial appointment to the Police Advisory Board. I have to try and find my correspondence here. We've been looking for someone to be on the PAB, what, 2 years? CAO, we've been trying to get the province to make the appointment. And we finally have one. Can you share that with us, or?
Yes, so the ministerial appointment works differently. That is, we share something a couple times a year, and to the Deputy Mayor's point earlier in the day, provincial communication isn't always as clear as we'd like it for our own community, but this is something that is appointed through the ABC, that's agencies, boards, and commissions recruitment every year. So we had heard anecdotally that people in the community had applied for the ministerial appointment position on the town's police advisory board. We had actually, when we did our police advisory board training this year, one of the things that we were told was that some communities have the ability to write to the minister and say, can we appoint our own ministerial appointment? And we have sent off a letter to the minister to do that from council, and that was months ago. We haven't heard anything. But town staff met a new staff person with the Department of Justice, whose role is to work with the different contracts. And we took the opportunity to say, hey, what's going on with this? And lo and behold, it turns out that they did have a person that they had received, and they've made this appointment, and we have, the date is August 3rd, but we just received this a couple weeks ago. So we're very excited to see this.
And she is now, the appointee, is now a member of the board. The province has appointed her.
She has appointed her, yes, but we would be looking for a council appointment as well, a council motion to appoint her, just to,
Okay.
because it is the town's police advisory board.
Our committee. Catherine McCarron, some of you may know Catherine. I think Councillor Carver, was she not on one of your committees? Catherine McCarron?
Oh, she's on the planning advisory committee and on the Plan Mahone Bay steering team. Yeah,
Okay.
and yeah,
She
I was
is-
on other committees with her outside, but
She's the provincial appointee to our police advisory board. We would entertain a motion to appoint Ms. McCarron to the Mahone Bay Police Advisory Board as the provincial representative. Councillor Feeney moves, Councillor Now seconds. On the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you.
Your worship, before we leave that topic, I was interested in the description of the board, which I now can't find. And maybe it's in a different attachment on there. But it seemed to have quite broad powers that don't necessarily fit with our own committee descriptions. I'm sorry, I just can't find this. Well, as per the mandate of the Police Advisory Board, the board determines the administrative direction, organization, and policy required to maintain an efficient and adequate police force. It just seemed to be a very broad, and that's the Police Advisory Board, not council. I'm not quite sure what my question is, other than an observation that it's a very broad responsibility and authority that exceeds any other kind of committee that we have on council.
Is that something that might be referred to the Policy and Strategy Committee
Perhaps for discussion.
for discussion?
Maybe that's just the way it is. that the police advisory board determines that rather than council. So it's a very different kind of function from any of our other committees. I see the acting CAO has her hand up.
Yes, the Police Advisory Board is determined by the Nova Scotia Police Act. And I am scrolling as quickly as I can, and I'm not able to find the description in here. But yes, that does seem to be a very generous wording. But yeah, the role of the Police Advisory Board is to oversee, but also it's a little bit different too when they're in a town, slightly different. So I feel like the wording is a little bit generous, but
In a
I'd
town
like
with
to
their own
be able to.
police force, CAO?
No, just a where we're not a regional board. Yes, I'm struggling to find the actual wording, but I can certainly follow up with council with the actual wording of what a police advisory board is as per the as per the Police Act of Nova Scotia. But I would agree that it is generous wording.
Okay,
Would we need a motion to refer it just for just information at the Policy and Strategy Committee? Does that make sense to do that?
I think a motion would be appropriate, Councillor Carver. It would certainly get it into the policy and strategy agenda.
Okay, well, I'll make that motion to refer discussion of this item or with more information to ask staff to bring more information about the role of the Police Advisory Board to the Policy and Strategy Committee.
Okay. Do we have a seconder?
Question.
No seconder? Councillor Feeney will second. On the question. Councillor Now?
I don't think it's anything that we really have any control over. It's set by the province and we don't have any control over what that mandate is anyway.
Okay,
Oh,
but
you'd
we
think
do have control over the
terms.
mandate that we've established as a council for our police advisory board. Do we not? And if we've established a mandate that is incongruent with that espoused by the province, then we need to have a look at it. No, take your point, Councillor Now. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other comments? Or on the question, rather? No? All in favor of the motion? Motion's carried. Thank you. Climate and Environment Committee. Minutes of the first meeting, November 2nd. Who will speak to those? Councillor Wilson, you have a question?
No, I was just going to make the motion, Your Worship, that staff be directed to send a letter to Sam Battaglia, thanking her for her service on the Climate and Environment Committee.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Carver. On that motion, on the question. All in favor? Motion is carried.
And
Anything else on that item?
Just as information on that committee, a solid 4 core of the 6 members of the committee will be remaining, have indicated intention to remain. So we're advertising for 1 or 2 more to come on. So, and continuing the work of reviewing the action plan, and then next we'll be tying it to the strategic plan. So it's good work, and Lauren was there for her first meeting and just took us through the action plan. So that was great.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Now.
Just in regard to the minutes, unless I missed it, I don't think Councillor Wilson's name was on the attendees, but he was there for making motions, so I think that needs to be amended.
I was also there in person.
Not according to the minutes.
Isn't that weird?
Okay, well, we'll go to the committee to have the change made. Okay. That ends our agenda. Oh, wait now, sorry, new business. We have a verbal report on public transit from Councillor Carver.
Yes, thank you. As part of one of the South Shore Housing Action Coalition meetings, we invited the executive director of the Community Transit Association, the provincial Community Transportation Network, and who to give us some information about how community transit works in the province. And she also provided us with some update on the application from Senior Wheels in Bridgewater to expand their service. So that project is really a go. It's going to be happening, and it's going to be soon known as Lunenburg County Wheels, and this will be a dial-a-ride service. Book it in advance, and I think fees and so on will be determined, but it will provide coverage in Western Lunenburg County, which has been almost the only area in the province that hasn't been covered by a community transit network. So I think this is great news. And if the fixed route transit system does ever develop, the two different kinds of systems models will work really well together. So when Dean Waterfield referred earlier to some seniors who had been forced to move out of town, and I've heard this story before, suddenly people who've been used to living in town with easy access to the amenities, they're out of town, and with the challenges of transportation to get to the things that they need. So with a dial-a-ride service, they have at least one more option, and hopefully affordable. They typically are. So that's really good news. And
Okay. The other thing, Councillor Carver, was the building inspector.
That's right. So this was a very rare meeting of the 3 units that have been talking about sharing building inspector services, Modal and Chester, District of Chester, and Town of Mahone Bay. And they had a really excellent presentation from a consultant who had been going through the agreement, the agreement in detail, and it got analyzed in detail. Dylan and I were both there, and the amendments were all discussed, and amendments approved and passed, and with the proviso that that's going to that's once it's approved by councils, it'll come to council. And that if Bridgewater and or Lunenburg want to join, that the agreement will stand as it is. So because they haven't been part of the discussions.
So it's
to be continued.
MODL, I'm sorry, Councillor Carver, MODL and Mahone Bay and Chester?
District of Chester, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Everybody really enthusiastic about it. It was the planners were all there. I mean, there were some good discussions about some of the challenges that they face with building inspection and incomplete applications and why delays happen. I mean, everybody wants to move the whole process forward to be more efficient. And I think the planners are doing everything they humanly can to make that happen. But when applications are coming in that are incomplete, or it's a timing is wrong, and because there are so many moving parts, you need to have one of those org charts about if this, then that, if this, then that. It's,
Hmm.
but they're really working hard to make it work more efficiently.
Were Bridgewater and Lunenburg not in the room, or did they just not agree?
No, they weren't in the room.
Okay,
No, it was
Okay.
just those three.
good. When might we expect to see the document? Any,
I don't know. I don't know when that's going to
Suggestions?
surface. I mean, that was a couple of weeks ago, so who knows?
okay. Thank you, Councillor Carver.
Welcome.
Councillor Wilson.
Yes, thank you. I had forgotten, but at the last area board meeting, we were asked to approach council about our council's position on the payment or not payment of the area dividend. And I talked to Maureen about this earlier in the week, and she pointed out that as often is the case, I was late and couldn't get on the agenda. So I'd like to make notice of motion for our next council meeting that I'll be making a motion to defer that we recommend deferring the area board payment, dividend payment, and we'll see where that goes.
Thank you. And there is an area board meeting next Friday.
Yeah, our meeting's
I
gonna be
think-
late for that, but we'll still get it done.
Okay, all right. Anything else? Do we have folks at home acting CAO?
We're gonna ask the deputy clerk out there if we have people, if there are any questions.
Oh,
There are
she's up
five-
there in Never Never Land. isn't she?
There are 5 people watching and no questions.
Okay, let's give them a couple of minutes in case they would like to enter a question. And then we'll move on from there.
We could guess who's watching.
We should have a little lottery.
Exactly. That's probably an invasion of privacy, but
Everybody who signs in would be given a number, and then we'll draw a number at the end. First prize is a coffee session with all the members of council.
he's including a new member of council next month.
That's right.
There you go.
Don't
Don't forget the vote, Mayor.
Every opportunity you have to reinforce the fact that Saturday is election day. It struck me the other day, we all stood out in the street on November 11th and thanked the people whose names are on the cenotaph for having made that ultimate sacrifice. But the capacity or the ability for us to vote in an open election is one of the cornerstones of what that whole process is all about.
Mhm.
So if you want to really thank them for their service, go vote on Saturday or vote online. Takes 2 minutes. Easy peasy process. Time is up. Do we have any questions, Deputy Clerk?
No questions.
Okay, thank you. Well, with that, we will say a good night to the folks at home that are watching us on YouTube. And if you have any questions that strike you in the middle of the night, call one of your counselors or call me or call the town hall and see if you can get an answer to that question. Okay, we are going to go in camera we have an item under the MGA 22(2)G. The discussion is focused on legal advice that is eligible for solicitor-client privilege. Entertain a motion to go in camera. Moved by Councillor Wilson, seconded by Councillor Carver. All in favor? Motion is carried. We will take 5 minutes while staff disconnect us. Good night to the people at home.
Night.
Are
See
we
you,
off, Kelly?
Yeah.
Can you make me the host,
Hi,
please?
Kelly.
Yes,
Still
I
says
forget. I was
recording.
almost gonna end meeting for all because it's my habit.
It says recording live YouTube up in the left-hand corner of my screen.